Right. First Chronicles 6, let's call this one Reconciliation and subtitle it Home. Because unlike the rest of the genealogies we've seen to this point, the territory that the Levites were to inhabit is going to be something that he specifically mentions during the latter portion of this chapter. But first and foremost, they're going to talk about the Levites, of course, being the source of the priesthood, and that being the descendants of Aaron. And so that's the first portion of the chapter, talking about the genealogy of the priesthood. Beyond that, it's going to talk about the rest of the Levites, split up between the sons of Kohath, Gershom, and Merari, and the different roles that they had, pointing back to Numbers, which not only acted as a census, but it acted as a census that described the roles that each person or each clan had within the nation of Israel. Part of them being, of course, the Levites. And so they're going to talk about some of the roles that the Levites had. Of course, beyond the priesthood, they were responsible for things like the music in the temple and, of course, taking care of the security around the tabernacle and the temple, and also the items used in the worship at the tabernacle and the temple. And so this genealogy is helping to remind us of that. But as we mentioned, beyond their roles, it's going to remind us that even though the sons of Levi did not have a specific inheritance because God was their portion, and they actually took from the offerings brought to the tabernacle and eventually the temple, they did still have areas where God apportioned them a home. And so the reason why that's so important is consistent with our theme of reconciliation. There was this thing called the sabbatical year. That meant no matter how much financial trouble individuals had gotten themselves into, they had a certain relief during the sabbatical year that provided them a break from their labors. Likewise, the year of Jubilee meant that there was no perpetual homelessness. At least there was not supposed to be perpetual homelessness in Israel, because every 50 years, everybody was supposed to be, according to Leviticus 25, free to go home. And understanding that even the Levites, people who had no specific inheritance, had a home. This particular chapter reminds us that everybody in Israel had a home that they were free to go back to, no matter how much trouble they had gotten themselves into, at least financially, understanding that there was still a concept as too far with God. The tragedy of that being that even if you had gotten yourself into a financial tight and could look forward to either the sabbatical year or the year of Jubilee for some relief, if you went too far in breaking God's laws, in particular, committing murders and other kinds of assaults, you could lose your life and lose your opportunity to recover what you had lost financially. And that points forward to something we will see in the new covenant as well, when Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son, a famous story that talks about a son who wastes his inheritance, living it up, doing things his way, but he wakes up and comes to himself and returns home after coming to his senses. Understand what Jesus does not say. The prodigal does not come home dictating terms, being like, okay, Dad, I'm coming home on the condition that you, and then, no. He comes back, as Jesus will say, at another point. Unless we receive the kingdom as little children, we will in no way enter in. And so understand that the way that the prodigal came home was not all that different from what Paul describes in Romans chapter 12, where in the first few verses he is going to say, don't be conformed to the way things are done here. This is not your home, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind into the kind of person that fits into the place where God is calling everyone home. And so even though we live now in a place where the legal system doesn't necessarily provide us any protection from perpetual homelessness, meaning if we fall on hard times, there's no guarantee we can ever get out. Israel was the type of place where God never intended for people to become perpetually homeless. And when he is asking us to trust him now, he is saying that likewise, there is a home prepared for us if we can take the time to believe beyond what we see around us, that this is all there is. But like the prodigal, when he came home, he did not come home dictating terms, but came home with the perspective of needing to be a healthy fit with everyone in the household. God is letting us know that no matter how poorly we might seem to fit here, there is a home for us as well. Insofar as, like a little child, we are willing to allow him to transform us into the kind of people who are a healthy fit with everybody he's bringing home as well.